What is that?
That's a sarcasm! It can open for miles! Run for your lives!
Sarcasm? Really?
Okay, Joy, if we can't follow the stream, we don't know where we're going. And if we don't know where we're going, we can't follow the stream! It is an endless loop of tragedy and consequence!
Or we could just ask those guys.
Oh, yeah, or that.
Boy, are we so lucky we ran into you guys! Boy, are we so lucky we ran into you guys!
Huh? Please! We really need your help! We really need your help!
What's their problem?
Guys, you just gotta turn on the charm. Hey! I bet you're the best crane crew in the world!
Wow, those guys are jerks.
It's so funny to me that this is like the 13-year-old idea of what sarcasm is. It's just like, it's really dripping sarcasm. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Psych Podcast where psychology meets film. I am your host, Dr. Alex Swan, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about Inside Out 2. I think this might be the first sequel that is on the show, but of course, way back when the podcast started, I think like episode 10, which has got to be coming up to its fifth year anniversary. If you haven't listened to that one, definitely check that one out. I talked with my good friend, Dr. Molly Metz, and we had a blast talking about the 2015 original Inside Out. For this one, it's kind of like an addendum to the original Inside Out, but there are a lot of shared themes, shared psych concepts, few more psych concepts in Inside Out 2. And so I kind of want to add this as like a companion episode. You first listen to me and Molly talk about the amazing Inside Out, which is, I think, my favorite Pixar movie. It's up there. I mean, they're all my favorites. Coco's up there, Up's up there. So there's a lot, but I think I get the most as a psychologist out of Inside Out. And so I just wanted to record an episode talking about some of the same ways that Inside Out 2 approaches emotions as a psych concept, but then also the new stuff that Inside Out 2 adds to the conversation, because we are talking about a girl who is growing and things are happening in her body that may not be the same as an 11-year-old, as in the first movie, right? So we are exploring a changing girl and what's happening inside of her cognition. So a little bit more about that in a little bit.
Huh? What the heck is that?
Woo! Problem solved.
But first, just as I do in all of my on all of these episodes and all of these intros, is tell you a little bit about the movie. So The first film was directed by Pete Docter and had a significant role in getting that one off the ground, getting psychologists like Dr. Keltner and Paul Ekman involved in creating not necessarily an accurate portrayal of human emotion. We don't have little homunculi running around our heads all as like a single emotion, but also embodying other emotions. Like it's not going to be accurate in that sense because it's a cartoon, but getting a sense of the theory behind emotion and what would be a particular set of emotions that a girl like Riley would feel at 11 years old. We move now 2 years, although it's been several years later. And Riley is 13. And this movie, not directed by Pete Docter, directed by Kelsey Mann. Now, you may not know who Kelsey Mann is, and that's okay, because while she's had a significant role in recent animation, most of it has been a artist and a writer. Her directorial debut was a TV series called Megas XLR. This was an animated show. And her first actual film was a short called Party Central. This film, Inside Out 2, is her first major motion picture directorial debut. She also wrote the story for this movie and wrote the story for The Good Dinosaur as well, which I think is great. And she was part of the animation and story for Monsters University, Clone Wars, Star Wars, Red Riding Hood, Duck Dodgers. So good. So good. And she was part of the Lightyear, which came out a couple of years ago, Lightyear film. So that's Kelsey Mann. Like I said, she assisted in the story. Meg LeFauve and Dave Holstein wrote the script. And of course, we got to talk about the voice actors here. Okay, so Amy Poehler returns to her amazing role as Joy. And so too does Lewis Black as Anger and Phyllis Smith as Sadness. But unfortunately, we lost Mindy Kaling and Bill Hader as Disgust and Fear, respectively. So it's important here to note that we've got 2 new voice actors to take their roles over, which have very similar voice profiles. So Liza Lapira takes over as Disgust, and Tony Hale from Arrested Development and Veep takes over the voice of Fear. And both of those 2 voice actors have very similar voice profiles to Mindy Kaling and Bill Hader. And so, yeah, I think most kids would be able to detect the difference. And of course, adults should be able to detect the difference if they're paying attention, if they know what Bill Hader sounds like, what Mindy Kaling sounds like. But I think the casting director in this movie, along with Kelsey Mann probably playing a role, did a very good job at getting those same voice profiles. And I don't know why I keep saying like I can't say it. It's so funny. Rounding out the new emotions, in I think one of her first voiceover roles is Maya Hawke. She plays Anxiety, more on Anxiety in a little bit. And Ayo Edebiri from The Bear is the voice of Envy. And I like the characterization of Envy, the way that they drew Envy. It's very good. Very good. Now, the other voice that I want to talk about that appears in The Brain is Bluefy. And Bluefy is a play on like Blue's Clues. And Bluefy, I don't know how much I'm going to be talking about Bluefy in this episode because he's not really all that important, but he has some great scenes. They're my favorite scenes. Bluefy breaks the fourth wall, but to the other characters is just talking to an actual wall. And he has a he has a partner called Pouchy, voiced by James Austin Johnson, who you might know from SNL these recent years with his amazing Donald Trump impression. So good. He plays Pouchy, and boy, oh boy, Pouchy gets violated by anger. Now, this is a kid's movie, and it's probably funny to the kids, but holy moly, it is both terrifying and hilarious at the same time. Hilarifying, I guess, is a word that I want to call it. So very, very good scene with Ron Funches as Bluefy and James Austin Johnson as Pouchy. So fun.
We are suppressed emotions!
You know what we call that? Denial. Can you say denial? Make your way down to Bluefy's house.
Please kill me.
Welcome to your eternal fate.
Yeah, I always thought Riley had a secret crush on him.
Who's that?
Oh, that's Riley's deep, dark secret. We get you out of that jar, then you get us out of this safe.
Don't you remember his power move? Yeah? Watch this! Come on!
I shall set you all free!
Hi, everybody. I'm Pouchy. I have lots of items. Exploding dynamite.
Oh, for crying out loud!
The humans are played by several people. Kensington Tallman plays the voice of Riley. Lilimar, I'm not sure who that is, only one name, plays the, I guess, older girl who Riley seemingly has some kind of envy, potential crush on. Valentina. Grace Liu plays the character Grace. Samaya Nuruddin Green plays Bree. Adele Exarchopoulos plays the French Ennui, which is not a human, by the way. I forgot to add Adele here and Ennui as part of the new emotions. My bad on that one. So I'm kind of out of order here. So yeah, that's Adele Exarchopoulos plays Ennui, which is an interesting character because Ennui is characterized as boredom in the film and just sort of acts bored the entire time. But of course, as we know, as people with the weight of the world on us, that ennui is oppressive boredom. Like, oh, why? Fun fact, I feel ennui most weekends. Anyways, Diane Lane and Kyle MacLachlan return as mom and dad, and Yvette Nicole Brown is Coach Roberts. Paul Walter Hauser vocalizes the new embarrassment emotion, but embarrassment doesn't really talk in this movie because, well, they're embarrassed the whole time. Love the hoodie. Love the hoodie. Anyways, enough of that. The movie came out this year. Saw it with the kids when it came out. Saw it with the whole fam, actually, when it came out. And the kids kind of liked it. They liked it. I don't think they liked it as much as the first one. And I think that's fine for most sequels. The sequel itself has a 7.6 out of 10 rating on IMDb. And I know I don't necessarily go too far into the weeds on IMDb ratings, but it's not far behind Inside Out, the first one, which has an 8.1 rating. And I've mentioned this in maybe an episode recently, which was another sequel. Actually, yeah, it is the first sequel on the show that we've talked about the first movie. So recently we did Top Gun Maverick, which is a sequel, but we didn't talk about the first movie on the show. So this is the first sequel that we talked about the previous movie first. So this is a first, everyone. I just want to say that. So 7.6, 8.1. It's hard to crack an 8 rating on IMDb. It really is hard to crack. Most people think movies are kind of just and that's how you end up being able to determine what's kind of a middling movie versus what is maybe a movie worth watching is, does it have over 7? That's the trick that I've learned over the years. Anyways, that's the movie there. So the rest of the plot is fairly straightforward. Riley's 13. She's got really good friends, a pair of friends at her middle school in San Francisco, because that's where she moved to in the first movie with her parents. And everything's seemingly going fine. She really loves hockey. But of course, as puberty sets in, she begins to start feeling new emotions. And this is where anxiety comes in, envy, embarrassment, and ennui. And I think it's interesting. Now, it's probably has nothing to do with how we characterize and label these emotions. But other than anxiety, the other 3 start with an E. And that's just probably coincidental, to be honest with you. Don't look in anything into that. But they all start with vowels. I mean, that's interesting, I suppose. Just kidding. It's fine. Anyways, those 4 emotions move in. And also something that I have learned more recently with my son is that there is a Gen Alpha, because he's 10. There's like a Gen Alpha meme around, and it might have been spawned because of this movie. But nostalgia is part of this meme. Like, oh, when you think about something from like a couple of years ago, oh, the nostalgia is high, or some kind of phrasing along that line, which is funny because nostalgia technically doesn't like start rearing its head until much later in someone's life, right? So I have nostalgia for the time when I was a kid and I watched cartoons on Saturday morning. I mean, I guess I could have nostalgia for last year, but who wants nostalgia post-pandemic? My nostalgia is 2019 and before, I'll tell you what. But in any case, I thought that was interesting, and I'm wondering if the 2 quick nostalgia scenes in Inside Out like led to the Gen Alpha meme on YouTube or whatever. I just thought that was an interesting tidbit to add. Anyways, Riley goes to a hockey camp over the summer, and her 2 other really good friends and teammates were also invited. And the idea was to get onto the high school team through this like multi-day hockey camp. And this is where Riley meets Valentina and Valentina's friends, and just then stuff happens in her brain and she doesn't know how to deal with it. So with that said, let's jump into the psych content, and I have some personal stories to share as well as we go through this episode. So let's jump right in. Okay, so the first thing, of course, is to just address the new additions. We have anxiety, which is a interesting emotion chosen because for a lot of people, anxiety is essentially an overactive fear emotion. And I'm probably going to get a lot of people yelling at their phones or however they're listening to this podcast for me saying that. But when you boil it down, anxiety is just fear of the unknown. It's fear of uncertain things. And that's what people end up spending their time ruminating about with anxiety. More on my personal journey in a little bit. So I thought it was interesting that fear didn't know who anxiety was when they first entered headquarters in Riley's head. Fear was like, who's this? And really it should be fear and anxiety should have some sort of familiarity. I would have liked to have seen familiarity between the two. Like, I feel like we know each other kind of vibe between the two. Like, they look at each other and they're like, you seem like I should know you. You know, that kind of thing. I wish that was maybe a subtle thing. So adults, maybe what wouldn't be that noticeable to children, but adults might recognize that anxiety does stem from the same brain mechanisms as fear. Not the same emotions. I want to be clear on that. I know, again, you're probably yelling. I know they're not the same emotions, but at the fundamental level, there are similar brain actions occurring because they revolve around things that either real or not real. Real in the moment or not real in the moment. Real in the sense that I can have fear for watching a scary movie because those images are real. I'm looking at them rather than like having an anxiety dream about being attacked by a ghost. Okay, those kinds of things. That's all I'm saying. At a fundamental level, would have liked to seen some of that.
I'm anxiety. I'm one of Riley's new emotions, and we are just super jazzed to be here. Where can I put my stuff?
What do you mean, we?
I wish I was as tall as all of you.
Who the heck are you?
I'm Envy. Oh, look at your hair. Oh, yeah, not happening.
Okay, who's this guy?
What's your name, big fella?
That's embarrassment. He's not really big on eye contact or, like, good talking, but he's a really sweet guy.
Well, welcome to headquarters, embarrassment. Oh, we're doing a fit. No. Oh, nope. Going high. Oh, you got a real sweaty palm there, buddy.
What emotion was that?
That's ennui.
On what?
Ennui. It's what you would call the boredom.
Well, come on up here. Onward. Am I saying right? Onward. No. Oh, nicknames. I'm gonna call you Wee Wee.
No.
Then we have Envy. Envy comes in. Ayo Edebiri plays Envy really well. And Envy is so tiny, which means Envy is looking up at even disgust and sadness, who are among the shorter emotions drawn, right? So, like, we've got fear. Well, I guess also anger is short too. But in any case, Envy is looking up at all of them. And I think that was a great choice to characterize and to draw Envy as this tiny, wide-eyed thing. Because a kid experiencing envy and maybe its partner jealousy would have this wide-eyedness. Like, ooh, I want that. I thought that was a great touch to the characterization of Envy. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, embarrassment is huge. The largest emotion that we have seen thus far, giant and pink, wearing a hoodie. I know they all wear clothes, which is quite interesting. They all seem to wear clothes that are very similar to their voice acting characterizations. Embarrassment has a giant nose, has a giant head, wears this hoodie, and pulls the drawstrings on it every single time he gets embarrassed. So he pulls the drawstring, and it covers everything but his nose. I think it was hilarious to do embarrassment that way. Not only the act of embarrassment, but also the size of the nose has to have some kind of role. I feel like that was what the animators were trying to do with this character. Like I said, doesn't speak at all. Does have a voice actor, Paul Walter Hauser, but doesn't really say much. Ends up being the MVP because embarrassment is the MVP. If you think about it, embarrassment helps us figure out our roles within society. Like, what have we done? It keeps us, I suppose, in keeping track of norms and mores and things like that and our roles in society. And it helps us to maintain that role. And so when we do something that breaks or violates some kind of norm or something like that, we feel embarrassed. And that embarrassment prompts us to reconcile, to do better, to say sorry, or to figure out a new way forward. Like if you were pantsed on stage or whatever, like you're going to feel embarrassment because the norm of being clothed was violated. Now, that wasn't your fault. You're still going to feel embarrassed, though, because a norm was violated. Unfortunately, you violated that norm getting pantsed, but obviously somebody else pantsed you. They're not going to feel embarrassed. You are. And so I think that's really good. And that helps Riley because in the movie, she has a falling out with her two besties in trying to be the best hockey player, to get on the JV team or varsity team, the high school team, whatever, to get on the team and to also befriend Valentina. And I think it's really critical here that embarrassment recognizes at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie recognizes that she did her besties dirty. Riley did her besties dirty and realizes this. Not until she has an anxiety attack or a panic attack, if you want to throw that in there. Of course, we don't see an emotion called panic, so we'll just have to call it an anxiety attack because anxiety is the one having the issue inside her brain. So if we want to characterize it like that. So those are interesting. We've got anxiety, going through puberty, starting to compare herself with other people. Really, anxiety in this movie is more or less social anxiety and less about any other kinds of worries. So that's also important. I know it's anxiety, and I know like anxiety scene as played by Maya Hawke, really well done, by the way, kind of is an amorphous anxiety, like a generalized anxiety, hence the name. But I feel like the vast majority of the story is more or less social anxiety. So that's something to consider here. And then Ennui is there just like, hanging out, being bored. And that's because, teenagers are still children and they're still trying to navigate more complex social situations, but also trying to do right by their parents for the most part, and feel like rules might be more oppressive. And so just gotta go, ugh. I think it's hilarious that Ennui has a phone constantly in her face. It's probably a control panel, like a handheld control panel, like the control panel in headquarters. So it's probably just like a mobile thing, but she's probably just watching like TikTok videos on it. That's how that's how I would picture Ennui in a homunculus form, like a real human form on a couch, just scrolling on TikTok. None of these are funny, blah, 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 scroll up, that kind of thing. And then before we move on to this, move on from emotional regulation and development, right? Riley's going through puberty, all this kind of stuff. The one other thing that I wanted to point out that happens in the movie is the control panel in Riley's brain is relatively simple, or so we think. Well, it kind of looks complex, but it's meant to be simple. The little balls, which I would consider to be like the glia of Riley's brain, right? So they're not emotions. They're just these workers that come in and do stuff. I feel like these are the glia, whether it's an astrocyte or a microglia or something. They always come in and they always are like, yeah, we got to do some construction up in here. And they replace the control panel with a far more complex. It's bigger, it's wider, it has more buttons and levers and sliders. It's quite insane, and they just wildly press on things. Don't worry about it. It's not supposed to matter, I guess, right? So I thought that was an interesting take, right? Because as your emotions become more complex, so too does the control of those emotions. Get it? The control of those emotions, because they are controlling Riley. I would like to see in Inside Out 3. I don't think they're going to make Inside Out 3. And please don't make Inside Out 3, Pixar and Disney. Please don't. We don't need to go any further down this rabbit hole of adding more emotions. But in my fanfic, to all you fanfic lovers out there. In my fanfic, I would like to see logic. I would like to see an embodiment of logic. A character that, like as Spock, does not express any emotion, okay? Because that would be antithetical to their ideas, right? So maybe not logic, but like, no, I guess it would be logic, reasoning, something like that. I don't know. I'm not a filmmaker. I just talk about them. Filmmakers can come up with the name of this character, but some sort of rational mind. When Riley's like, I don't know, 27 or something like that, right? 15 years into the future, we've got Joy trying to find any semblance of joy, and there's sadness over there's anxiety hanging out, and they're all just like, man, we've been at this for a long time. And then here up comes Logic and is like, sorry, everyone, the party's over. No more emotions. We're just going to do this by the thinking book. Something like that. That would be hilarious. I think I would find it funny. But I am also, I research thinking biases and reasoning. So, that would be great for me. The characters themselves kind of make checks on, like they check themselves as far as the story goes. Although Joy is still irrationally joyful and optimistic, but I guess that's her characterization. And we can't fault the filmmakers for keeping her that optimistic. Now, from a storytelling standpoint, if these were humans, we would be like, girl, you need to get real here, okay? Because this is you're harming yourself with how much optimism you have. Like, you need to accept that sometimes you are defeated, that kind of thing. But of course, Joy can't do that. Joy is incapable of doing that. And so Joy must find the joy in every situation, even if she doesn't feel it. She, being Joy, doesn't feel it. Which then means that Riley doesn't feel that joy, right? Riley doesn't feel joy unless Joy touches the control panel, and struggles with that completely. They're away from the headquarters for most of the movie. The original 5 are away from headquarters. Well, no, sorry. The original 4 are away from headquarters. Sadness does stick around, and I feel like that's an important one to stick around, because not only does Sadness read all of the manuals, because what else are you going to do when you're sad? Sadness saves the day by co-opting embarrassment. Being sad and embarrassed. What better to change your mind than being sad and embarrassed? I say that both with my tongue firmly in my cheek, but also like with some truth in my voice. I guess part of being an adult, right? Part of being an adult that has to take the good with the bad, because them's the facts of life, as the theme song tells you, right?
And my personal favorite?
I'm a really good friend.
Did you know the change in your couch could change the world?
Oh no, we should do something.
No, that girl is a social Titanic. Do not get on that ship.
Guys?
It's okay. I drop things all the time. I'm Riley. I'm Grace.
I'm Bree. Turns out when you put all of those beliefs together, they make the most wonderful thing of all. Her sense of self.
I'm a good person.
It's what helps Riley make good choices. 13 years of hard work, all wrapped up in what some might call our masterpiece. You know, one of the hardest challenges we found...
Oh my gosh, we're back in the game!
Okay, so moving on into some of the other things that are more expressed in this movie. The idea of a self-concept. I want to talk about the self-concept because they moved on from this idea of core memories. By the way, core memories, not really a thing in memory research prior to Inside Out. So you can thank Inside Out for the pop culture phenomenon of a core memory. No, that's not to say that Inside Out told us something about human memory that didn't exist before in the literature. No. It just wasn't called core memory. These are just memories that are most likely the most vivid to you, that had highly emotional content, whether it's positive or negative, a lot of time negative, but in the sense that you can kind of remember them outside of cued contexts. So a lot of us can remember things if we are cued to remember them: smells, tastes, sights, sounds, music being one of those more important set of sounds that it can be connected to memories. So those are cues. Those cue us to those memories. But like I can, and many times these are considered flashbulb memories in cognitive psych textbooks. I'm not saying that a flashbulb memory is the same thing as a core memory. Don't get me wrong there. But the way that I talk about these kinds of memories that are considered quote unquote core memories from the first movie is flashbulb memories. Like I can tell you all about my September 11th, 2001 day, and from like start to finish, except for maybe the school, maybe the beginning and the end of the day are more vivid in my mind, and I can recount what happened, where I was, my orientation in space on where I was, the argument that I had with my mother as she was walking up the stairs, the conversations that I had with my friends before school started, but we were on campus, about what happened. Like all of that feels very vivid to me. That, I think, in this, last 10-ish years since the first movie talked about core memories, I would consider that a core memory. Is it a core memory about me? Not necessarily. Of course, I'm a part of those memories, but it's something that obviously happened far away from me at the time. I was in Los Angeles, and of course that happened in New York. So this idea of a core memory is one of the things that was heavy in the first one. Also, personality islands. These were also very heavy, like a kid figuring out who they are. Well, in this movie, 2 years later, Riley has developed a self-concept. And so what they do in the movie, and I'm probably going to butcher this because I've only seen the movie once. I think it may be on Disney Plus now, but I haven't watched it again. So I'm going to probably butcher this. So I apologize if I do, if you've watched it already and you're like, no, that's not what they do. So bear with me here. So they create Riley's self-concept in the basement of, I'm gonna call it the basement. In the basement of headquarters, they send down a bunch of memory balls that are created from Riley experiencing something, and they send them down, if they pass muster, down into this like self-concept web, right? We have these like strings coming down that like reverberate with a certain phrase or something like that down in the basement. And there are a few of these really special balls. Of course, the balls are really important. These complex balls that are multiple emotions. We learned in the last movie that memories can be multiple emotions, can have multiple emotional qualities, happy and sad, that kind of thing. Well, now they create this like thread of Riley's self-concept. And the main thing that you hear from Riley's self-concept that I got to tell you is devastating throughout the movie. Devastating. Just every time I hear it in my head, I'm just like, oh, this poor little girl. She's trying so hard. And obviously the whole story is contrived, but it's just like you feel for her. You're like, yeah, I've been there, man. I'm so sorry. Anyways, her self-concept throughout the majority of the movie is, I am a good person. And that is what Joy and the other three, fear, disgust, and anger, are trying to get back to the self-concept underneath headquarters. But of course, they get kicked out of headquarters and anxiety takes over, and anxiety begins to warp this self-concept and warp it through a social anxiety lens, as I was saying, right? So Riley is beginning to put more weight in her self-concept about what others think of her, and it's really sad. But it's interesting because when we look at how they structured this part of Riley's mind, every detail about how the animators constructed her mind in both the first movie and this one are brilliant. So we get that memories aren't just a static recollection that has emotional significance like in the first movie. No, these show a dynamic interaction of memory and emotion to form not only Riley's self-concept, as I said, but the schemas, these organizational frameworks for how we navigate the world. They're organizational frameworks of our knowledge, and they help us interpret information as we experience it. So she's got these new interactions with these new emotions that are fresh. And there's a really great scene between her mom and herself when her emotions are going haywire and she goes from one to the next. And, you know, I don't have any teenagers yet, but I was a teenager once, and emotions are a roller coaster. And it's a really good encapsulation of that roller coaster of a burgeoning teen going through puberty, and has all of this new complex, has all of this old complex information, I want to say, and but new experiences, both internally and externally. How does Riley navigate that? And so we see that both on the outside and on the inside. A perilous journey, of course, for the emotions in her brain, right? We get to meet Floofy. They got to go over the sarcasm, which is, you know, kind of lazy, but no, we'll take it. I mean, it's a nice play on the word sarcasm. They don't spend a lot of time with it, which is kind of a bummer, but you know, so it's kind of, in that sense, it was kind of lazy, but I really like how they did this like thread, and then you pluck it like a guitar string almost, right? You pluck it and you hear the complex idea, the memory. And so in the basement, and I keep calling it a basement, it's like a cavern, honestly, with an elevator up to headquarters. This cavern, this island, and all around it is this like water where the memory balls just float. And when they get put into the water, they send up this string that, like I said, you can pluck like a guitar string. And it all contributes to this self-concept that's in headquarters. And instead of it being a ball, it's like a spherical set of threads. So like threads or lines in any spherical orientation. Kind of looks like an orb with only like a skeleton structure. I don't know. This is an audio medium. I can't really show you. You have to go look. You have to go look for yourself for this. But I mean, the way that they did it was really great because they're not focusing on memories anymore. They're focusing on the interaction of memories that have been accumulating information and putting it in the structure. Now, where was the structure when Riley was 11 years old? Yeah, well, that's the issue with storytelling in a sequel kind of way, right? You have to add more elements to the lore to make the new story be somewhat different or more different from your original, right? Otherwise, it just feels like it's just the same story over again. And in many ways, this is the same story over again. But as we age, things get a little bit more complex, and that's a problem, right? Things get more complex. We don't know how to navigate it with our existing schemas, our existing self-concept. So
person.
What are you doing?
I'm selfish. I'm kind. I'm not good enough. I'm a good person. I need to fit in. But I want to be myself. I'm brave. But I get scared. Success is I make mistakes. I'm nice. I'm mean. I'm a good friend. I'm a terrible friend. I'm strong. I need help sometimes.
Now, I wanted to return to anxiety, and I wanted to use this time to talk to you all about my journey with anxiety. And I'm going to try to be as positive and upbeat with it as I can, though, you know, I do recognize that it is a constant struggle in my mind, and it's a constant struggle with the people that I love and the people that I work with 100%. But when I went to this movie with the kids, I was not expecting to feel like my life was being represented as a 13-year-old, because that's exactly how I felt throughout the movie. Once anxiety began to take over headquarters, culminating in the anxiety attack that could not be stopped if not for joy, I think I would have crumpled into a sobbing puddle in that movie theater, right? The fact that joy saves the day, main character energy, right? Oh, joy, why are you coming in here and ruining everything? No, I'm kidding. Of course, joy has to save the day here. And while it's a particular storytelling choice and your biggest actor, Amy Poehler, it is critical for this. Because the only times that I break out of my anxiety spirals is when someone reminds me of the joy in my life, the joy that I can have, the joy that I should be experiencing, right? So anxiety is introduced as the character that is going to help Riley with preparing for future challenges. What those challenges are unnamed, and it's important that they're unnamed because nobody knows what the future is, and people with overactive anxiety or clinical level or even subclinical level are planning for future challenges that may never eventuate, that may never come to bear, and we're just still stuck doing that. And so this character begins to start pressing buttons on the control panel and is explaining everything to the original set of emotions. Like this, I'm helping Riley, planning for the future and linking what we do now to what we need to do. And of course, what we need to do is Riley getting on the hockey team and putting her best foot forward. Well, unfortunately, anxiety doesn't necessarily put your best foot forward. And if it's not managed with particular strategies or treatment, you're gonna have a bad time. And it's gonna disrupt daily functioning. And so if a person like myself is struggling with that anxiety on a particular day or particular month or whenever, the idea here is to mitigate that by exploring strategies, going to therapy, maybe having medication, etc. Okay, exploring it so it doesn't disrupt daily activity. Anxiety ends up making Riley worse at hockey than she is. And that's not fair for Riley, right? That's not fair for this little girl that we have come to love, especially when she's like on that bus in the first movie and just finally realizes that she shouldn't be on the bus and running away back to Minnesota. we understand, we empathize with her. And then she gets to this point where she can't control the anxiety and it just spirals. And the interesting thing, so Dr. Keltner contributed and consulted on this film again. I don't think Paul Ekman did like he did on the first one, but Dr. Keltner did, right? At Cal Berkeley. Forget his lab, the lab's names, but it's like Good Vibes Lab. He can contact me about using that. I've trademarked it. Good Vibes Lab. Anyways, his lab. He also contributed to the movie again. And the one thing that the story writers wanted to do, like Kelsey Mann, wanted to explore was like this idea of anxiety and how it works with other emotions. And like I said, joy needs to come in and save the day, break Riley out of this anxiety. Because honestly, anxiety doesn't know how to manage things that constantly need to be managed, constantly need to be thought of. The worry is what I'll call it. So I've been struggling with anxiety for the better part of my life. The life that I can recall has been full of anxiety. And a lot of that anxiety is characterized by generalized anxiety disorder, which is what I've been diagnosed with. And I finally got a diagnosis in graduate school. I manage it now with good people around me and medication. And save for the spiral here and there, I think I've got it pretty managed. That doesn't mean it's gone. That doesn't mean it goes away. That does not mean I don't have good days and I don't have bad days. But in the long run, I feel like I'm in a good place with it. I feel like I've come to an intellectual understanding of it and can sometimes intellectualize my way out of it or contact the people, Astrid, good friends that have important things to say and can, talk me down from these anxiety spirals, find the spark of joy in there. So that is the majority of it. I worry constantly. I can't stop worrying. I can't stop thinking about what may or may not be so in the future and what I should have done better in the past. So I tend to ruminate a lot as well. And I know people out there can empathize with me on that one. Ruminating is tough, right? Especially when it's like really important. But here's the thing that I don't really tell a lot of people, and that is my anxiety tends to be in the social realm. So I have not been diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, and nor do I want to explore that diagnosis because honestly, there's not much to gain from that. I mean, I can intellectualize it all I want, but I tend to compare myself to others and consider that what I have done may not have been the best, and I need to work harder. I need to do more things. I need to be the best. So there's a spot of perfectionism in there. There is a healthy dose of imposter syndrome sometimes, although less so now as I get older and more entrenched in the things that I enjoy learning about and studying, biases, movies, psychology, all of that stuff, even the tertiary stuff. Like I just listened to an audiobook about the world according to physics. Like what the hell? But that was a fascinating book. And so I can intellectualize it all I want. And so not as much imposter syndrome these days, but feelings of embarrassment in front of 20-year-olds. And trying to work my way through like I should care about what my students think, but only up to a point, at which point, if I care too much, I think it's pathological in that case. And so I'm still working on that as well, like coming to a point where I can make a fool out of myself and not feel like weird about it, which was not the case 10 years ago. Like if I made a fool out of myself, I would be embarrassed for days. Not because like I should feel embarrassed. Like people act weird and do weird things all the time. It's not like I would do things that constantly broke norms or mores or anything like that. I just felt like people were judging me negatively. And that's the hallmark of social anxiety. And it's been actually quite therapeutic to do this podcast for the last 5.5 years and into the future, because I've met so many wonderful people, which has necessarily broken me out of my introversion, my lack of networking that I did professionally. Like, I just got back from ACT 2024, the annual conference on teaching, just last weekend as of recording. And I had such a great time. And it was the first time in a long time that I felt really, really good about the things that I've done at a conference, the relationships, the professional relationships that I'm building with people, and not feeling weird about it. Like, just speaking my mind. An example is that, I've been at the forefront of using AI, and me and a friend of the show, Jordan Waggy, have been trying to share our insights with our colleagues, rather than talking about like plagiarism and cheating and what students are doing, but rather how could AI and LLMs help the working folk in academia, like professors and instructors and administrators, etc. And I went to an affinity group, and I felt comfortable speaking my mind about maybe holding off on introducing it in the classroom with students who may not have the skills necessary to grapple with the skills that you're trying to teach them, and then offloading those skills onto AI. I mean, I will, I'm more than happy to have discussions abound on that, right? Myriad discussions on that, and nobody's really right or wrong. But I went and one of the guys that was leading the affinity group found me afterwards and was just like, "Hey, I just want to bring up what you were. I just want to probe you a little bit more about the comments you made." I called it "I'm me being a wet blanket," and so he's like, "I just want to." Address the wet blanket. And he tried to say, but like, look at all the amazing things that it can do. And I'm like, yeah, it can do all these amazing things. But the difference is that you have a professional life that can work with this stuff. And if you need to put it down, you can put it down, because it's a little project that you're doing that you don't need to focus on. Your students need to learn those skills before they start offloading that kind of stuff for things that they need to learn how to do, for things that are right now. So that's all to say that, like, I'm slowly working through it. But the way that the movie characterized anxiety as more of a social anxiety, and being judged by peers and being judged by those you perceive to be a higher status or of higher intelligence or of higher whatever, and you're doing that upward comparison, social comparison, and you're just sitting there going like, oh man, this poor Riley, she has such a good friend base, and she's throwing it all away to try to appeal to these older kids who maybe don't care about her the same way that her friends do. And I felt that. I felt that so hard, because I struggle with friends. And that's the first time I'm publicly saying this. I struggle with friends. And I think that's the biggest thing about my social anxiety, that I am potentially not good enough for my friends. And that's hard. That's a hard thing to say out loud. But it's something that I need to say out loud, because the only way that I think that I can make it make sense to myself is to say it out loud. Too many jumbly thoughts, too much rumination, too much shoulda, coulda, woulda, and I just need to say it out loud. And so if you're still listening, thank you for listening. I really appreciate you staying with me in this chunk. I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm kind of all over the place. I didn't really plan what I was going to say at this point. My notes just say, go into a personal exploration of my own anxiety and what this movie showed me about it and how I felt when watching the movie. And so I saw myself in the movie, for better or for worse. That's the only thing that I said. And so I'm kind of been going from one thing to the next. But that's where the vast majority of my anxiety lives, is that and the movie showed it to me, and I was marking Facebook. I was like, listen, Zuck, I'm in this picture and I don't like it. Whatever happened to that, by the way? Anyways, that's neither here nor there. So, anyways, that's my personal journey with anxiety. I'd love to hear about your personal journeys, whether you want to share them privately or publicly. I don't mind. Either one sounds great, because I want to find my people who are just like me and really just like have a blast knowing that we are actually good enough, and people are people, and people do people things, and we don't have any control over that. That's the hard part there, is understanding that. Now I can say that out loud. Doesn't mean I'm going to feel it that way. No, because anxiety's still up there, rattling around, touching buttons. I don't like it. Stop touching buttons, Maya Hawk. I think that's where I'm going to leave this episode, with a personal plea, I suppose. Please share your journey with me if you have one, because I know you're out there and I see you and I want to validate you, because my friends have validated me, and my best friend, Astrid, of course, my wife, has been my biggest cheerleader for almost, I want to say, 20 years. So that's 14 married and 5-ish, right? So we're almost 20 years, 5-ish dating. She tells me all the time that I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Thanks, Al Frickin. I appreciate it. So if you haven't checked out Inside Out 2, please do so. Like I said, not as good as the first, but still well worth your time. And just know that if you have anxiety and you haven't seen it yet, you may feel like you are in the movie. Okay. I'm going to leave you with this. Disney and Pixar did not do a good job with ending the movie, because unfortunately, anxiety doesn't go away when you figure your shit out. It doesn't go away. It stays with you. It's pathological for a reason. By its very nature, it doesn't go away. And it sends the wrong message to kids that they just need to find a joy and all of their anxiety will dissipate within a day. Of course, it's a story. I get it. But I think a kid might take the wrong impression. And so that's one thing to consider here when you're comparing this movie to its predecessor. The predecessor says it has a really important message about the complex interplay of emotions and our memories. This movie has an important thing to say about how growing up means more complex emotions. But I think it misses the mark, unfortunately, when a nice little bow is wrapped around the whole story at the end. Doesn't mean anxiety goes away. Of course, anxiety is staying in headquarters. Less involved, we don't know. But of course, in the quest to end a story, a kid's story, on a positive note, anxiety takes a back seat. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't necessarily take a back seat. And so I think Disney and Pixar missed the mark on that one. I'm happy to have discussions about that. It's fine if you disagree with that. That's okay with me. This is a very personal movie to me, of course. So in any case, that's going to do it for this episode. As always, until the next one, thanks for listening.